everybody. I think we'll get started now. My name's Mary Rice. I'm president of the Bloomington League of Women Voters. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I also want to thank the Sustainability Coalition. The Sustainability Coalition is co-sponsoring this event with us tonight. In addition, I want to thank the City of Bloomington for offering this space to us. The City of Bloomington is so good about partnering with us and offering space when we need it. And so thank you to the city. I want to thank Patricia Hauser, who's our speaker tonight, and I'll get back to her in a minute. Dorette Kirian and Lois Norgard, who organized this entire event. Suzanne Keinitz, who did the promotional materials for the event. Lisa Neely, who organized our volunteers, and the League of Women Voters Bloomington volunteers. It took a lot of time to put this together, and I want to thank everybody who was involved in any way. The League of Women Voters is a nonprofit, nonpartisan political organization. So we don't affiliate with any political party, but we do take positions on issues, including environmental issues. And if you ever feel like it, go to the League of Women Voters, the National League of Women Voters website, and all the League of Women Voters positions, including their positions on the environment, are on the website. The primary purpose of the League of Women Voters is to grow the vote, protect the vote, and empower the vote. Part of empowering the vote is education, and that's why we're here tonight. The League of Women Voters Minnesota has 2 priorities this year. The first priority is about voting and voter registration, which is critical considering the election year that this is. The second priority revolves around the environment. So this is a fitting program for us to do tonight. It's consistent with that, and it's just about Earth Day, so the timing's right. Bees and other pollinators are responsible for reproduction of 90% of all flowering plants. And bees are in trouble. So this is a significant issue that's critical for us to take a look at, that most of us don't know much about. I certainly don't. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing what Patricia Hauser has to say. Patricia Hauser is with the League of Women Voters South Tonka and is a co-founder of Humming for Bees along with Jeff Dinsmore, who's also here tonight. Patricia is a retired Minneapolis public school teacher, and she and her husband just got back from a trip to Antarctica. So welcome, Patricia.
Thank you, Mary, and thank all of you for coming. Right now, as you know, bees are in trouble. And we feel at Humming for Bees, when we talk about bees, we're talking about all pollinators. They're all being affected. Tonight, Lois has some cards. I don't know if you've got one yet, but there's some little white cards that she'll be passing out now. And you can pass them out now, Lois, so that if you have any questions, I'd like you to keep your questions until the end, because I want to get through the slides, and then I'll take as long as you need for the questions, even if we have to go outside and talk out in the hall. I don't want you to forget them, so you can remember them and say them yourself after we're done talking here. Okay. Let me tell you what I'll be talking about tonight. That'll be Humming for Bees, a little bit about our organization, why bees are important, what's happening to bees and pollinators, and with that I'll be using the League of Women Voters Bee Briefing paper right here. I'll be using some of the information from there. Then I'll talk a little bit about what you can do. Let me tell a little bit about why bees are important. No, pardon me, about Humming for Bees. That's where I'm starting. Humming for Bees is a grassroots, 100% volunteer. In fact, I see one of our volunteers here in the audience, Tom. Organization. We're not for profit, which means we do pay taxes on any signs that we sell, any Bee Safe Yard signs. However, we're not a 501c3, so you don't get the benefit of being able to write it off. We are also started about 2.5 years ago, and our goal was to educate ourselves about what was happening with pollinators, educate others, and then work with cities and communities to help to develop a bee-safe, pollinator-safe city or community. Let me tell you about the signs first. We had a double campaign, a Be Safe Yard campaign, and then the other part of what we wanted to do was to get one city to pass a Be Safe City resolution. The Be Safe Yard, the little yellow sign that you see, is actually an idea we got from Dr. Marla Spivak from the U of M Bee Lab. She said, put a sign in your yard, get the conversation going. And I think she also must have spoken with the Department of Ag, because they, in their best practices sheet that's over there, there's a desk copy over there, they talk about putting a sign in your yard just to get the conversation going. People still don't know what's happening here and that there's an issue. Now, anyone who has that sign in their yard, it doesn't mean that they have tons of wonderful flowers that are free from the get-go, I mean free of systemic insecticides, which I'll talk about, but it means that they care about making some really healthy decisions. It means that they've signed a Be Safe Yard pledge, which says they'll not use pre-poisoned plants poisoned with systemic insecticides such as neonicotinoids. They'll not use insecticides and fungicides on their yard, and if they use herbicides, they'll do it carefully with using best practices. And then they'll keep learning about bees. If they can sign and agree to those 3 things, then they're eligible to purchase the sign for $10. Now, regarding the Shorewood becoming the first Bee Safe city in the state, we approached Shorewood in February of 2014, talked with the city council several times, and answered their questions, found out more information from their city public works department, and after that we're able to work with their lawyer to come up with a resolution that we could both agree with. And they passed the first Be Safe City resolution in the state of Minnesota. The city of Eugene, Oregon, passed the first Be Safe or Pollinator Safe resolution in the country. We were about 4th or 5th, somewhere in there. Why are bees important? Bees and all pollinators are important because they're part of the balance of nature. They pollinate plants that produce food for humans and other animals. Along with other pollinators, bees give us 1/3 of the food we eat. We can thank them for over 90 different crops grown in the United States alone. Their pollination services are free, and they provide anywhere from, I've heard, $18 to $24 billion of income for people in the United States. Some facts about bees that you might not know. Not all bees are black and yellow. Not all bees sting. Not all bees make honey. There are about 20,000 species of bees worldwide, and honeybees are only one of those species. There are about 400 different species of native bees in Minnesota. As you can see on this picture, the only honeybee is with the gentleman in the white bee suit. And the reason there's been so much to be said about honeybees is because they're called managed bees. They come back to that hive for that beekeeper. And when they come back to the hive, the beekeeper can take out a frame and look and see how things are going. We can't do that with the wild bees. There's a wonderful book by Heather Holm from Minnetonka, right here in Minnesota. I'm going to just put this down. Maybe you can see it on there. Can you see that on there? Okay, then I'm going to hold it up. Oh, whoops, sorry. There it is. Pollinators of Native Plants. It's an excellent book with lots of pictures that Heather has taken herself and talking about all of our wonderful native bees here, not all of them, but most of them here in Minnesota. Here's the bee briefing paper that was completed last November and then published in December. This is the League of Women Voters on the state league with a group of people from around the state work together on developing this book. It's called The Impact of Neonicotinoids on Honeybees. At the top, you can get it on the state League of Women Voters Minnesota website. That's what the LWVMN stands for. And if you go to lwvmnbees.org, you can find this paper plus some of the slides that I'll be showing you tonight. You're welcome to use it to other presentations that you might be giving, or just to get the information here. You'll be hearing a lot from this. Now I want to go over this word. Took me about 3 weeks to learn how to say it. And I finally, as a former first grade teacher, I decided I can read this, I can break it down. So if you look at it, it says neonicotinoid. Neonicotinoid. I had to practice that for about 3 weeks, actually. So be patient with yourself, but break it down, and then you can say it. Or just say neonics. That's fine, too. Now, an interesting thing about neonicotinoid is that these are the names of them. If you look on a bottle of pesticide, on a package containing pesticides or a bottle that has of pesticides, it might say imidacloprid, clothianidin, acetamiprid, dinotefuran, thiamethoxam, thiacloprid, nitinpyram, any one of those. And it won't be saying neonicotinoids, but these are in the neonicotinoid family. Neonicotinoid is a class of insecticides, and these are their members. It's like family members, like you have Jim, Tom, Joan in your family, but these are their names. You don't have to know how to say them, but you will want to recognize them. And over on the table is a little yellow sheet with these names listed, so you know if you see this on a bottle, that's not something you want to buy or use. All of them are neonics. Let's talk here about the worldwide honeybee colony loss. There are many interrelated factors. It's not just one thing that's causing the problems that bees are having. There's habitat loss. So we look around in the suburbs here, and we see lots of grass. We see lots of cement, lots of paved roads. We don't necessarily see lots of flowers. They don't have places to live, and there's not much to eat. Pesticides, that's one of the key factors, and that's one we can do something about. I'll get back to that. Pathogens, just like us, bees get sick. There are viruses out there, so they have pathogens to deal with. Parasites. They have one called the Varroa destructor, aptly named, and also there's another mite. I forgot its name, but there are parasites that cause problems and cause bee death. There's also poor nutrition. Remember I mentioned they don't have places to live and there's not many flowers. Flowers are bee food, and bees don't distinguish and say, this one's a weed, I'm not going to eat it. This one's a pretty flower, I'll eat from this one. They use flower, what we call weeds. From dandelions, they find protein. From creeping Charlie, they find carbohydrates in their nectar, and lots of both from clover. And then there's climate change. There are some plants that are co-evolved, native plants that are co-evolved to bloom at just the time that a particular native bee is emerging. And climate change has interrupted that. Evidence suggests that the use of neonicotinoids is a driving factor in bee decline, strong evidence, and we'll be talking about that tonight. Let's take a look at the bar graph now. If you look at the gray bar at the bottom, it says 15% there. In 2006 and 2007, from that time, up to that time and beyond, for winter lost, beekeepers were saying they could survive and they're, requeen and do things. If they had 15% loss, that was considered an average loss. That was okay. But if you look at 2006, the yellow bar, that was winter loss for that year. It was more than double the average loss. Beekeepers cannot sustain that. And then if you look over at 2010 to 2011, there's an orange bar. Scientists and beekeepers began to notice that something else was happening. The orange bar shows that bees were dying in record number even after winter, in spring and summer, and other seasons where normally that had not occurred. And if you looked at the end of the graph, in 2014 and 2015, it's up to like between 42 and 45, and those are U.S. hives. That's the average for bee loss, bee colony hives loss in the United States. And remember, a colony consists of about 30 to 40 to 50,000 bees. And we're talking about colonies lost. In Minnesota, the farmers of Minnesota, the beekeepers of Minnesota lost over 51%, or maybe it was 51%, but it was over 50% that year. If this happened on a cattle ranch, when they started losing 20%, there would be a lot of help for those ranchers. Our beekeepers need help. I wanted to mention this particular video, DVD. You can rent this at the public library. You can stream it or buy it or get it for yourself and share it with your neighbors. It's called Vanishing of the Bees, and it tells about the beekeepers and their situation and how they dealt with the colony collapse that was happening when they didn't even have a name for it. It's an award-winning documentary. Also over on the table are 3 other award-winning documentaries you might want to take note of. Now, what are these neonicotinoids? They are a systemic insecticide. They're powerful neurotoxins developed in the 1980s and introduced in the mid to late 1990s. And now they are the most widely used pesticide in the world, globally. They're used in horticulture, commodity crops on the farm, corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton, canola, sugar beets, sunflowers. In home use, you can get them at your hardware store or a nursery, and they're used as insecticide sprays, soil drenches, tree injections, granules. And in urban forestry, they're used as tree injections and soil drenchings. And I want to say something here about tree injections. The city of Minneapolis, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a concern. We all know that there's a concern here in Minnesota about emerald ash borer and our ash trees. The city of Minneapolis made a decision to cut down 40,000 ash trees over the next 8 years rather than treat them with neonicotinoids. That's pretty significant. And I want to just share this book here, Bringing Nature Home by Douglas Ptolemy. He talks in there about ash trees, and I believe he says, no, maybe ash trees don't feed bees. So some cities are saying, well, we'll use neonics on these ash trees. They don't feed bees. Bees don't go to them for their pollen or nectar. However, there are about 150 other species of moths and butterflies and other insects that do use these trees. So they're being heavily impacted by the neonics. More about neonics, their effects on bees. The thing that's tricky about neonics is they're a new kind of pesticide. They're not like the kind of in the old days when I was growing up where you could just wash it off. These are systemic. That means that the root, the stem, the leaves, the pollen, the nectar, the fruit, even the getacean droplets, the little sap kind of that's on leaves sometimes, even those have become poisonous and have neonics in them. They're neurotoxic in that they interfere with the bees or pollinators' learning, foraging ability, their memory, their navigation, reproduction, and immune system functioning. And remember that other list where we said all these interacting factors are causing a problem for our bees and pollinators? Well, if your immune system is down and you have poor nutrition, and then you add a parasite on top of that, and the list goes on. I mean, there's so many reasons that this would do in a bee. Now, I want to also say that with this neurotoxic, there's I forgot that. I'll get back to that when it comes back. I skipped my mind. Neonicotinoids are synergistic. That means there's one, I was reading about one herbicide, when it was used in conjunction with that, if a bee went to that herbicide and then went to this, it was like 1,000 times more toxic. Scientists have figured that out. And when are bees exposed to this? They're exposed when they're collecting nectar and pollen. They're exposed when they're drinking contaminated water, during seed dust from the seed coat where the part of the coating floats off, and prolonged exposure throughout the entire growing season, because neonics last in a plant. They're not sure how long. It depends on the amount they used and a number of factors that they haven't figured out totally, but they can say they can last for months to years, so through a whole growing season until the maybe 2 years from then. When they're used as a seed crop, know that 94% of corn crops, of conventional corn crops, 94% of those are seed coated with neonicotinoids. Farmers are having difficulty finding seeds if they want to plant conventional crops. They're finding difficulty finding seeds that are not coated. We need to help our farmers be able to find seeds that aren't coated. And 30% of soybeans are coated. They're applied to 150 million plus acres annually. And a recent report says that this widespread prophylactic use, and that means prophylactic means before you even know if there's a problem. So it's preventative, sort of. Widespread prophylactic use has negative effects on the non-targeted organisms. That means they're going after maybe the corn borer, but whatever other animal insects get in the way, maybe a parasitic wasp that would be very helpful to the farmer, they also die in the process. So they lose their ability to have natural pest control helping them. Also, research has found that there are no yield benefits to the farmer for using these coated seeds. They're less cost effective than alternative methods of old, and they have unpredictable efficacy even for the targeted pests. Even for the pests they're trying to kill, it doesn't necessarily work as well as the older methods did. Let's take a look at some of those. So alternatives to neonicotinoids might be IPM, or integrated pest management. Integrated pest management uses biological rather than chemical measures. They prevent pests with crop rotation. They introduce natural disease-fighting microbes into the soil, because they believe healthy soil makes a huge difference for the fighting the diseases and the predators. That they have a release of special organisms that prey on pests, and they use chemicals only as a last resort, and they target specific pests. So it isn't just a broad spectrum thing that attacks everything that comes near it. Agroecology is also something that is used. People are finding new and different ways of helping our whole ecosystem benefit, not just bees and pollinators, but the whole ecosystem. We've heard of cover crops before, and we've heard of crop rotation, improves soil health and disrupts host-specific pests. Now, neonicotinoid seed coatings, again, are a major cause of environmental contamination, because only about 5% of the seed coating actually enters the plant. 95%, the other 95%, is blown, sloughed off, or otherwise dispersed into the air, into the water, and into the soil. So neonics in water, because neonics are soluble, United States Geological Survey sampled streams in the U.S., and they found that 50% of those streams were contaminated. And here in the Midwest, where we have so much corn and soybeans, they found 75% of those streams and waters contaminated. When you think, well, what are we drinking? We're drinking from those streams and getting our drinking water from rivers and cleaning that up and drinking from well water. How is that affecting it? Unfortunately, there are very few studies about that. That would be something that we need to encourage our people to study, our government. What about food? As we said, neonics are systemic. They're absorbed into the plant through its vascular system. So they're found in plant roots, leaves, fruit. They're present in many foods we consume daily. The residues can't be washed off, like our pesticides when I was growing up. They can't even be peeled off. And our organic food supply is also at risk because of drift and water solubility. Now let's take a look at neonicotinoid pesticide global sales growth. In just 6 years, the sales of imidacloprid and thiamethoxam grew by 64 and 192%. I'm going to let you read the list. This chart is also in the bee briefing paper, which is online that you can find. And I won't go down the whole left side, but let me just mention at the top line over here on the right. Let's take the product imidacloprid. The application, it's used as a soybean seed coat. It's sprayed on tomatoes and sprayed on leafy greens. It's put out by the Bayer Crop Science Company. That's the company related to Bayer aspirin. And global sales growth in the year 2003 was in millions of dollars is $665 million. That's what they made. If we go to the very end in 2009, just 6 years later, global sales growth was $1,091 million. And if you go down the row at the end, you see that it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. In June of 2014, the WIA was released. It was called the Worldwide Integrated Assessment, and it was released by the scientists of the Task Force on Systemic Pesticides. These were a group of 29 scientists from around the world, and I should say 29 independent scientists, as opposed to industry-funded scientists. These were independent scientists from around the world who studied over a 4-year period, they studied 800 different documents about neonics and Fipronil, another systemic. And you can find their information. The League will have it on their website. Humming for Bees has it on theirs. You can find the whole worldwide integrated assessment there if you wish to read it. Or if you wish to read a summary, there's a 3-page summary called there's a press release and a media briefing page, and that's a 7-page. So you can either read 3 pages to get summarized or 7 pages, or you can read the whole document itself. But at the end of their study, these scientists said, we want governments around the world to reduce the use of and tighten regulations of neonicotinoids on a global scale. We want them to educate farmers regarding alternatives, such as IPM and organic practices. We want governments around the world to replace neonics with principles of prevention and precaution. And we also want them to research why pesticides have replaced proven sustainable agricultural practices. What can a home gardener do? Well, make sure that you don't purchase neonicotinoids in your plants or in plant products. Let me just put this up here. This is another sheet by the League of Women Voters, and it talks about why bees are disappearing. About what to say when you go into a store and you want to buy a plant, even if it's just a hanging basket. This is called Ask Before You Buy. So you go to the store or the nursery or the garden center, and you say, I want to buy this hanging basket. How do I know if it's free of neonicotinoids? And then you've got your little list of that little yellow list over on the table that names them acetamiprid, clothianide. You don't have to say those names. You just have to say neonics. And then the store people might say, well, all the plants that we grow are neonic free. And you say, great, I am so glad. And which are the ones you don't grow? Which are the ones you're getting from your suppliers? Because I want to make sure I don't get those. There are some things that they won't know. If they don't know, don't buy them. On the back of this sheet, and it's over on the table, this is also on both websites, Humming for Bees and League of Women Voters MN, bees.org. These are plants. This is a list of plants that bees like in Minnesota. Plants, and tells which bees like them, native or honey bees, and so that's kind of helpful for you to have. And then it's really important to consider doing native plants in your yard this year. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Other individual things that you as a citizen can do about plants, as we said, plant clean plants, plants free of systemic pesticides, neonic free, plants that bees like. Like us, they have their preferences. Plant a diversity of plants that bloom from spring through fall. They need to eat spring, summer, fall, just like we do. Plant some flowers in clumps and masses so that they don't have to fly all over the place. Bees have been known to wear out their wings. And live with some leaf damage when you get a plant. Our nursery centers, they've been caught unawares. They thought this was a good thing when they started using it. They thought, oh, good, our plants won't have aphids, or our plants won't have this or that, and they won't have any leaf damage. We need to be not such perfectionists, because that's not the way we need to go from here on. Tolerate some flowering weeds. Remember, the bees don't call them weeds. Use IPM practices in your garden. Do stop using pesticides. Stop using those insecticides, fungicides, and herbicides. Use leaf mulch and organic compost in your gardens. Ask organic gardeners how they do it. How do you do it? Get the neighborhood kid to come over and hand weed your garden. Learn about and plant some native plants. Now, in addition to native bees, there's native plants. That means plants that are indigenous to this area and thrive in our soil and climate. And there's lists all over the internet, no matter what area of the country you live in. But here you can find that out too. Usually, they have long roots, so they're great for soil retention when it's rainy, and it's great for moisture retention in time of drought. They need weeding, like any plants, but once established, they need less water and little or no fertilizer. And they feed both honeybees and native bees. And I need to mention here, honeybees are not native to this country. They were brought over by the colonists. Colonists wanted their honey and they wanted their pollination services, and then they brought some of their own plants too that they wanted here in the new country. So they aren't native here, but like probably just about all of us in this room, they've been here for a long time, and this is their home now. This is a nice picture of native plants. Notice the turf grass on the left. Look how long its roots grow down. So in times of drought, people end up putting more and more water on them. Look at our native plants. The roots go down. This one on the right, there's one that's like 15 feet long. And not only that, but when they die back, they've kind of aerated the soil because there's little lines are in there, those little places where the roots used to be are in there. Something else individual citizens can do? Let's talk about our yards. Lawns are the third largest monocrop in the U.S., and especially here in Minnesota after corn and soybeans. Current lawns are food deserts. They're sterile. They don't feed bees or pollinators. And Ron Bowen, I believe he's the CEO of Prairie Restorations, says, if the only time you use your lawn is when you mow it, you don't need it. It's time to create the new paradigm for the ideal lawn. And you might have to be the brave one to start it. I know one thing I love about driving into Minneapolis, I love seeing their boulevards and their front yards. They get this. They have started planting all kinds of native plant gardens. Now, take a look here. Consider replacing most of your lawn with areas of native plants. Consider having maybe a small defined border of grass, like the picture on the left here. And yet, to get a Be Safe Yard sign or to be planting native plants, your yard doesn't have to look that nice. Ours doesn't look like that, but we have a Be Safe Yard. And over on the left, if you're not into native plants, at least consider maybe a little clover, maybe leaving a few dandelions growing. And there are other flowering plants out there. There's also low mow grasses that the U of M is working on developing. So consider a new paradigm for our lawn. Bees are sounding the alarm, and not only for the many benefits and all the nutrition and beauty we get from these creatures, and from our butterflies, and from our dragonflies, and from all the other pollinators. Bats help pollinate things, birds, so many of them. They are part of the very ecosystem we depend upon to sustain life on this planet. One of the things you can do is to support Saving America's Pollinator Act. HR, House of Representatives 1284. So I know in our district, let me just put this little sheet up here. It's over on the table there. And it talks about how you can just tap into the zip code, put in your zip code on a certain, I guess you'll have to see it over at the table. A zip code over at the House of Representatives to find out who your representative is. And then there's a toll-free number for the Capitol switchboard. And then you can just say, please support HR 1284. This is what you can do on a national level. So it's been around, and just because it says the Pollinator Act of 2015, it goes through 2016, and then they'll have to renew it for 2 years again. And it was started in 2013, but we still haven't had enough House of Representatives people sign on to this. So please bug your House of Representative person. And then in Minnesota, some things you can do. Tell our government leaders to protect pollinators. Here is our Department of Ag Commissioner Dave Frederickson. He'll be coming out soon, we hope, with his report on neonicotinoids here in Minnesota. We're still waiting for that. Here's his phone number and his email. And ask him to support pollinators, to protect them, actually. Tell Governor Mark Dayton, when a bill comes along that protects pollinators, please sign it. Tell your legislature, and then there's information to find. And these are some of the things we're encouraging you to share with those legislators on a state level. The two yellow ones, the top one says ban systemic insecticides, including neonicotinoids, but also any others, such as Fipronil and any other ones that they'll develop. Part of the concern with stopping, some of the scientists have said, we're concerned about stopping the use of neonicotinoids because they'll come up with something just as bad or worse. The chemical companies will. Well, make sure that you say systemic insecticides, not just neonicotinoids, because they're not the only one out there and they're not the only one that they'll develop. And then increase clean, pesticide-free pollinator habitat and food supply. Isn't it ironic that this little creature that gives us so much variety in our nutrition, that they are starving, that they do not have enough to eat? So we need to plant clean plants for them, flowering plants. Support over here on the left, support farmers to transition away from neonicotinoid-coated seeds. Some of them don't know some of the research that's been done, and they still think that they may be getting some benefit from it. Others do know and are having trouble finding the seeds. And help them to learn alternative methods of growing crops. That's maybe been lost in a couple generations now. Also, increase transparency about pesticide use by enacting a pesticide use reporting law. So we're able to find out if our neighbor uses some kind of spray, we'll find out what's in it or if we're coughing or our kids are reacting. And on the right, restore local control over pesticide policies. That means that if your city, the city here of Bloomington, decides to pass a resolution, they will be able to ban or restrict the use of systemic insecticides such as neonicotinoids on city property. But say the whole city got together and said, we don't want it. No more. We don't want it on anyone's lawn. And every last adult and child and everybody agreed they didn't want it. They could not pass that resolution because all but 7 states have a law on the books saying that it's called the preemption law, that cities are preempted by the state, that the state has the right to decide if a whole municipality can use a pesticide or ban it. That should be changed. People should be able to decide about the life around them. And then restore the 2014 nursery labeling law. That said that plants cannot be labeled as bee-friendly or pollinator-friendly if they have a trace of neonicotinoids in them. Common sense. It's lethal and sublethal. It either kills the bee immediately or it kills them later because of all those things. Remember, it's a neurotoxic. It accumulates in the bee, and it doesn't go away. It interferes with their foraging, their memory, their immune system. Well, this nursery labeling law, people thought, yay, this is a good start. Not enough, but a good start. But then in 2015, the legislature shifted, and they decided that nurseries could call things bee-friendly if they didn't kill bees outright on the spot. So if they weren't lethal. So if they were sublethal and they didn't have as much, they could still call it pollinator-friendly. That sheet is over there. You can take home with you to keep too. One other thing I want to share here is our Humming for Bees website. This is our resource page. At the top, if you are from a different city, anywhere around the country actually, you can find out what we did in Shorewood to get that Be Safe City resolution passed. It says how we did it. We've got resolution examples. We did it in Minnesota in 2014, and now that was July of 2014. And now in 2016, this is, what is it? It's April, April of 2016. There are 15 to 16, I believe, 16 or more cities or communities across, because it isn't just cities. There's been some townships, and there's even a school that's passed, a school board that passed it for all their schools that have passed resolutions regarding systemic insecticides. We have handouts on there, and also you can find the Saving America's Pollinator Act. There's also free bee video links. One of the things that we did when we were interested in talking to our neighbors about pesticides and sharing with them what was happening with bees, we had a free video night, and we called up friends and neighbors and said, hey, come on over, see a free video and learn about bees and what's happening with them. And we showed the vanishing of the bees, or else if it was a shorter version, only people had a short time, we would show Dr. Marla Svivik's Why Bees Are Disappearing. And you can find that right under free bee video links. There's also about clover and your lawn, a couple other free ones on there. And then there's free BVDs, bee DVDs. They're not free. You have to order them from the public library or get them online. And then there's articles, research articles, such as the one I mentioned about the Worldwide Institute of, the Worldwide Integrated Assessment by the Task Force on Systemic Pesticides. And then if you have concerns about wasps and hornets, that's on there too. So I think this is a lot of information. Don't be overwhelmed. You don't have to do everything at once, but we do ask that you do something at once. Choose one thing that you're going to do. Thank you. I'm ready for questions. Yes.
I just did a thing for my parasitology class on over-the-counter medication, not medications, but flea and pesticide repellents just for cats. I never even got to the dogs. There were so many. And Fipronil was one of the things that showed up. I was looking for organophosphates, but I do recall a lot of Fipronil showing up. Are you saying that that's also systemic, like the nicotinoids?
It is a neonicotinoid. Pardon me, it's not a neonicotinoid. It is a systemic, yes.
Okay.
And
we're using it on our cats and dogs.
That is correct. And it's a choice. I remember talking with someone, and they said, I would rather have my dog have a risk of, this neurotoxin affecting them than getting what they can get with flea and ticks. And that's what they said. And that was their choice, and that is their choice. And I'm not a vet, and so, yeah. But it is a systemic. Oh. And I believe that was also what was sprayed on, I don't know if it was Seattle or Oregon, Washington State or Oregon, where they had a huge bee kill a couple years ago in a Target parking lot, and then they had to put nets over it, and I think it was Fipronil that was used. And I think I also heard that the bee loss that was compensated recently in Minneapolis was due to Fipronil, one of them anyway.
Are there any pesticides or herbicide that are bee friendly? And if so, can you name the brands?
You said pesticides or herbicides? I'm just going to clarify. We learned in this process that pesticide includes any of the sides. So that means herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, rodenticides, includes all of those. Whatever you consider a pest that kills it. And herbicide refers to plants or herbs. Insecticide, there's not an insecticide because insecticides kill insects, so any insecticide will kill a bee. And as far as herbicides, I I don't know enough to answer that. I'm sure there are some that people have said they use. What we use is we dig them out. We dig out the herbs and the plants we don't want. So we dig out a certain after the dandelions bloom in our yard. I either get a kid in the neighborhood to go around and cut off the little tops so that they don't spread, because I don't want them all over. And personally, we have a little claw thing that we pull back the creeping Charlie from our flower beds because I don't want it in there, but otherwise we're fine with it. And we plant a little extra clover so there's some food there. And so that's what we do. I heard of another person buying a little plant flame thing so that they could burn a plant on the spot, so they'd spot treat it that way. Another person talked about using vinegar and dish soap and water. There are different recipes online. And I know there are two under lawns, there are two things listed regarding organic care, lawn care. And they have different products that they use, and maybe they can advise you there.
Thank you for the presentation tonight.
Sure.
One of the things that came to mind as you were talking about the pesticide issue or the insecticide issue is the concern about mosquitoes and the diseases that are carried. And of course, that's back in the news again. So how does that fit with everything you're talking about tonight?
I wonder about this too. I know that there are mosquito pellets that they can drop in the water, and then there's not a spray going out, and that it's targeted so that it, gets at the larva somehow, whatever it does to it. This is not popular among a lot of people, but I'm not really excited. I could just tell you my own personal opinion. I'm not really excited about that. I'm kind of wondering every once in a while, how can we more interfere with nature? I mean, when do we get back and learn how to sort of live with it or learn how to coexist with it? I don't know. I don't have the answer for that, but I think people should talk as cities and individuals and as neighborhoods, because I know some people are very affected by that spraying. And sometimes it's spraying and not pellet dropping. So I wouldn't want the spraying, I know that. And people are trying to have organic gardens, and then they say, and then they were sprayed. So I think it depends on the individual unit, family unit, and neighborhood unit, and city unit, that they need to come up with a plan that works for them. Good question, and I think people are concerned about it.
Do you believe humans have come to the point where they feel like they have to control every darn thing they don't like?
Sounds like
And I'm really concerned because we feel like we're the watchers of nature and the controllers of nature and the controllers of our environment. And time and again, whether it's trying to control a bug, whether it's trying to control a disease, we've gotten it wrong. And I think we all have to think about, do you feel that way? I mean, to me, it's a very frustrating point to be.
Since you asked me personally, I'd say I would agree with you. I think what a shame. I mean, we have this wonderful, beautiful planet, and look what we're doing to it. We're trying to control nature. There used to be a commercial out a long time ago saying something about Mother Nature. What is it? What was that one about? You can't mess with Mother Nature. And then, but, you said it very well. Thank you.
One of the key points on this should be to go after the agricultural companies, the Cargills, because what they're doing is they actually set it up where they dictate to the farmer what they will use for seed and how they will grow it, and there's no choice left. The farmers are not independent businessmen. A lot of them are mining the soil with continuous corn. Mm-hmm. And they're so in hock to this system that if they don't get a contract or an assurance to sell their product to people like Cargill, then they're out of business effectively. So we have an economic system that has destroyed the private independence of our farmers. So one of the things might be to really encourage those companies that are trying to break that monopoly. And then the other thing is certainly on the political level. Every year, every 3 years, correct me if I'm wrong, every 3 years Congress passes a multi-billion-dollar egg bill, and that is fought over contentiously. And I think that one of the things is to fight with the groups that are fighting for clean water, that are fighting against soil erosion, because all of the problems that you identified tonight are being exacerbated. For example, the water in Minnesota is being trashed by these egg interests, and they don't feel any responsibility for it, you know? I mean, literally, our rivers and streams are becoming Cargill's sewer for the multinational corporation that doesn't give a rip, you know, about this stuff. So, I mean, that's very depressing, but I think you need to start with the reality of that. Now, you mentioned Dave Fredrickson at the Egg Department, and they've implemented a water quality certification program that is trying to recognize and reward farmers who are implementing programs to preserve water quality or to enhance water quality on their lands, building buffers.
Thank you. I want to add one thing to that. One of the other things we can do is support CSAs, community-supported agriculture, and maybe go to the farmers markets and support them also. But community-supported agriculture means that you sign up ahead of time, not knowing for sure what kind of crops are going to result, and then you get you pay a certain amount, and you either get a full share or half a share of whatever they grow for the whole season. And that's one of the things that we can do to support farmers who are working to be organic and who are smaller farmers and who need support.
Yes, on a positive note, it's my understanding that the European Union or a number of the countries in the European Union have banned these products, or in the process of banning them. Is that correct?
In 2013, December of 2013, the European Union did ban a number of neonicotinoids, number of these, and that's because the beekeepers rose up and went into the cities and, well, you'll see it on that Vanishing of the Bees. You'll see what happened, kind of. They listened to the people, and however, it was a 2-year, I should say they put a moratorium on it for 2 years, and now this is the time where they're going to renew or review it. And while we're on that, I just want to mention that you remember Rachel Carson's book that came out about DDT, Silent Spring? There's a new book out. It's called Poison Spring. It's by a whistleblower from the EPA, E.G. Valiantos. He worked for the Environmental Protection Agency for 25 years and now lives in California. And he talks about the secret history of pollution and the EPA. It might be worth reading. Any other questions? Yes?
I know there are some lists of bee flowers.
Mm-hmm.
Do they like all flowers? I mean, I know they need a flower basically, but like I have violets coming up right now, and is that a bee flower?
You know, I don't know enough about all flowers. I know that every bee doesn't like every flower. And just like, you know, the monarch really needs a particular flower. What is it? The
milkweed.
Thank you, milkweed. They need that to live. And some of our native bees need certain plants to make it. And the list that we have over there on the table are flowers that bees do like in Minnesota, but they don't like necessarily all flowers. Also, you have to watch out for some of the new flowers that are being developed. There are some certain extra roughly ones that have a lot of prettiness but no nutrition. So you don't want something that's been real tampered with for your garden, as pretty as it might be, if you really want to feed pollinators. So I'd say get online, look at the list that we have here tonight, look at other plants for our area. And while you mentioned that's jogging something else in my mind, and that is, I remember talking to Heather Holm from Minnetonka, the author of Pollinators of Native Plants, and saying, oh, I'd like to kind of amend my soil so I could have this plant or whatever. And she said, Patricia, work with the soil you have. Find out what you have and what grows there. Work with what you have. Don't amend it. Use it. And I thought, clay soil, Joe Pye weed goes great there, and butterflies and bees love it. So it's a learning for all of us. We didn't know all of this. We've made a lot of mistakes, but we can start to undo them now.
Just to follow up too on, we know that a lot of the agricultural seeds are coated. Do we as gardeners have to worry about that when we purchase our garden seeds, peas and whatever?
You know, I personally think it's really important to buy organic seeds. That would be my choice. I'm just telling you what my choice is. And if you were buying corn seeds here in Minnesota, I would imagine, and you weren't buying organic corn seeds, your chances of getting non-coated seeds would be pretty limited. I mean, if 94% of the seeds are coated. So I would recommend, the only way to know for sure if what you're planting is clean, for sure, is if you've had it for years in your garden and you're just transplanting, or if your neighbor and you know they're organic or they use all these practices and never use insecticides or fungicides and are careful with what they buy and you share plants, or if you buy organic seeds. That's the way you know for sure. But if you do your best and you ask and the nursery owner, says this works and this is really good. Also, I want to mention, did I mention this yet? The Friends Plant Sale. These are two really good sources for clean plants. Glacial Ridge Growers. This is a wholesale catalog. I'll have it over there for you to look at. They're out of Glenwood, Minnesota, and I know at a lot of co-ops they deliver flowers that are in plants, vegetable plants, little sets of them. And the Friends Plant Sale, the Friends School have their annual plant, so I think it's like the 26th or 27th year coming up. And this whole newspaper here is dedicated to plants, and their plants are as clean as they can possibly make them. They really work really hard for the last 3 years to have neonic-free plants. So if you go there, it's on Mother's Day weekend, it's at the State Fairgrounds, and take a wagon, plan to make it a fun event because it's crowded, very crowded. And they have a system where they only let so many people in the building at the time. And there are wonderful native plants that you'll find in plants, and they have it marked as to what bees like it, or butterflies, or native plants, or honeybees. And they have a little section here, our policy on neonics, and how can a gardener be sure that any plant is free of neonicotinoid pesticides. They have, you can call them, you can go online and look at the Friends School Plant Sale, their catalog.
When you mentioned dropping the pellets for the mosquitoes, it made me think that we need to be working for ways to control mosquitoes. I mean, we may not have all these dangerous diseases in our backyard, but the rest of the world does. So we have to find a way to keep the bad things down while we're still protecting the good things.
I don't know how they did it before. And I know we have certain creatures that eat those mosquitoes, our fish, and what else, our bats. And so we need to nurture them too, maybe put up more bat houses. They're in danger. Any other questions? Thank you very much.